We will fight this cull as long as it takes to place it in the history of barbaric acts.
It's ineffective and it's inhumane and it's not going to work. It's actually... That's the real bombshell. How amazing that nobody's quite tweaked this.
That is what we desperately need.
Well, I'm with you.
Thank you very much, Brad.
Rock stars coming in ain't gonna have the answers.
I didn't come here for a fight. I think we can make a change. I came here because I think we can offer hope. Welcome to the rescue, otherwise known as Save Me HQ. And we founded it in 2010 because basically we wanted to rescue animals. Why? Because I guess I spent my whole life caring about animals and thinking I should do something about the way they're treated. And finally, I had the opportunity. I met Anne, who was already running a wildlife rescue. She's rescued thousands of animals over the years. And so we repurposed this lovely old building. And this is what we do here. This is on-the-ground rescue of wildlife. And I love it because you can actually see results here. You get your feeling that you're achieving something. I'm not a celebrity who sort of lends his name to something and kind of endorses things. I'm a worker. I want to make a difference in the world, and this is the way to do it. So we're going to see who we have in residence right now, OK? Let's go and see Anne and see what she has.
We rescue wild animals 24/7, 365 days a year. From deer to badgers, foxes, and many, many hedgehogs.
This is Hoggerty. She's a late juvenile and just had about everything wrong with her that a hedgehog could have wrong. A knight has come to see you. So she's just having her final weigh-in today, and we're hoping that she'll be able to go.
Of course, this is how I met Anne. She turned up with a hedgehog, basically, at my door and said, "Can we release wild animals on your property?" And I went, "Yeah, OK." What does that entail? So, obviously, then she took over completely, and it's wonderful. It's brought the property alive. We have wild animals everywhere now, and that wasn't the case when I came in.
Obviously, saving hedgehogs and other animals is a million miles away from what people mainly know me for. I still tour and record, but when I put the guitar down, I can pursue my other passions.
I resisted asking.
You might see me on TV talking about space and astrophysics.
So it could have happened spontaneously in another solar system, not just another planet.
Or stereophotography. And as well as rescuing wildlife, you might also see me fighting for the rights of animals, and one species in particular.
Green guitarist Brian May has been campaigning on this issue for some time. He's founded something called Team Badger, hoping to persuade the government to change its view.
It's a shocking story. It's hard to believe this is more than a decade ago. Everybody's thinking that they're going to find a solution, but I didn't realise what a huge thing it would be for me.
And the government surely will have to listen, won't they?
Speaking out against the culling of badgers has become as important to me as music.
I haven't been down here before, have you?
No, it's the first time in here, and they're all together. There's all 6 of them.
Yeah, I love them. I mean, they are just adorable, these guys. And you know, the funny thing is, it's hard to tell them apart for us, isn't it? It's like members of KISS. It looks like they've got makeup on. They're like rock stars.
The badgers may be cute, but their cuteness has nothing to do with the reasons we're concerned for them. As a species that inhabited Britain long before humans, and who have an equal right to be here, they are now being brutally persecuted for a crime I believe they didn't commit. They're accused of spreading bovine tuberculosis in cattle. This disease is caused by a pernicious organism, a pathogen known as Mycobacterium bovis, or M. bovis for short, which can devastate herds and ruin farmers' livelihoods. Government policy on cattle dictates that any cow testing positive for the disease has to be removed. So, every year, around 20,000 so-called reactors are slaughtered. For over a decade, Westminster's strategy for controlling bovine TB has been this policy of test and remove cows, plus killing badgers. The common belief has been that badgers pass the disease to cows through sniffing or by drinking from cattle troughs. Anne and I have never been convinced by the logic or science behind this, so I decided to speak out. Not that it made me very popular.
We're not really sure what this perturbation effect really truly
Perturbation
is.
is caused by protesters, is it? Great. You seem to be incredibly uninformed. I'm amazed.
I'm rather well informed, Brian, as I'm sure you know.
Let's just because it's easy.
I have to be clear and tell you that the place I come from is that even if badgers were the cause of the spread of bovine TB in cattle, I wouldn't be in favour of killing them. But I want to find out the truth.
You see, I've never believed badgers are the cause of the spread of this disease. So back in 2011, we started to publicly and loudly campaign against the cull.
We will never give up. We will fight this cull as long as it takes to place it where it belongs in the history of barbaric acts.
We've tried everything. We've organised marches. We organised a petition and got 100,000 signatures. We got our debate in Parliament. We won the vote on the debate. Did it make any difference? Not a scrap. But what it did do was generate a perception out there that I was in direct opposition to the farmers, whose livelihoods were at stake.
There is this badger cull going ahead, Brian, which farmers say is the only thing they can do in the meantime.
It's like, yeah, the farming community is saying, you know, something has to be done. Well, yes, something does have to be done, but it's not a cull, you know, and all the scientific evidence tells you that a cull is not going to work.
But what exactly was the scientific evidence? Well, in 1997, the then government carried out a 10-year experiment, the Randomised Badger Culling Trial, RBCT, also known as the Krebs Trial, after its author, Lord Krebs.
And that trial was set up as a proper scientific experiment, probably the biggest field experiment that's ever been done in this country. And the question was, would killing badgers be effective as a way of controlling TB in cattle? When you add it all up, what it says is that if you really want to control TB in cattle, then killing badgers is not going to be a terribly effective policy. You will get a small reduction if you do it on a big enough scale for long enough, and you've got to keep on doing it. Killing badgers is a sideshow, it's a distraction, it's not fair to wildlife, it's not fair in the long run to the farmers.
So why did a badger cull happen if the government's own trial said it wouldn't be terribly effective? Well, 5 years after the experiment finished, a new government did their own reinterpretation of the report and decided that the badger cull was a policy worth pursuing.
Culling badgers can lead to a reduction of the disease in cattle if it is carried out over a large enough area and for a sufficient length of time.
So naturally, I was disappointed when the scientific evidence was pushed to one side, but because I'm pragmatic and I'm a realist, I just say, well, okay, politicians are paid to do a different job from the job that I'm paid to do, and they make their choices and they live with them. It doesn't mean to say that I haven't ever since then been critical of the policy that the government's adopted.
So even though badgers are officially a protected species, their fate was sealed.
A controversial cull of badgers is to go ahead as part of efforts to control the spread of bovine TB.
The pilot scheme in Somerset and Gloucestershire will see some 5,000 animals shot over 6 weeks.
This is being tested in these two pilots to give a glimmer of hope to those desperate farming families who are seeing cattle slaughtered.
If you need an insight into what those farming families are thinking, there's no better barometer than this place. The Royal Welsh is one of the biggest agricultural shows in Europe.
It's devastating.
put TB-infected badgers down, cut the numbers down.
Badgers, test them. If they're positive, get rid of them straight away.
Of course, if you believe that badgers are the spreaders of the disease, this all makes perfect sense. Farmers have been told that badgers are the problem and that killing them is their only hope. Over 10 years after the cull was introduced, the slaughter is still going on. The unfortunate badgers paying the ultimate price for their supposed crime. And we too are paying the price, because 10 years later the bovine TB problem is still there, and dealing with it costs the UK taxpayer over £100 million a year. It gets worse when you realise that the majority of the badgers killed don't even have TB. And if they did, we now think it unlikely that they've been passing it back to the cows. It's a tragedy beyond belief. Over 200,000 badgers have been killed. It's the biggest crime against wildlife anyone's ever seen. And it's in Britain, which is supposed to be a country that respects and loves their animals. And has the slaughter done anything to limit the spread of TB in cattle? In my view, no.
For what use is a countryside with no wildlife? That's what this government is taking us to.
And the ranting rock star was told he didn't know what he was talking about. Even I doubted my conviction sometimes. By 2016, we'd exhausted all of the protests and lobbying, and we were still nowhere near changing the minds of the people who really mattered, the farmers. So, if they wouldn't listen to us, and maybe I could understand why, we decided we had to listen more carefully to them. And that wasn't easy. Not just because many farmers were unsure of us, but also because some of our own friends in the animal welfare community wondered why we were befriending the farmers and not trying to stop everyone drinking cow milk. But for us, it was the only way to get to the truth. So Anne and I went to spend a day on Malcolm Huxtable's farm in Devon, while his herd was being tested for BTB. The skin test is a recurring, potentially catastrophic event for dairy farmers. This was my first time witnessing what happens, and it was to have a profound effect on me, though perhaps not in the way you might expect.
Today, we're reading the test. Each cow was clipped twice, injected, and the vet will read the result this morning. Thank you for coming, and I hope that
Thank you. I hope we can help in some way, but we're here to learn.
At the moment, the farmer is stuck with this horrendous regime. Every few months, he has to herd his cattle all together. They have to go through this little gate and be tested, have needles stuck into them, whatever. There's a feeling of tension in the farmers which they pick up.
So each one I'm checking and actually feeling for a lump.
It's agony for farmers. And at the end of the test, certain cows will be pronounced reactors and they will be taken away and slaughtered.
She is a reactor. So, unfortunately, the next step to that is that we tag. That tag then identifies that cow, basically, as a reactor.
So tell us what'll happen to her now. What happens? I'm so sorry. So sorry. Yeah. Can I touch her?
Yeah, she's quite to love.
Can I just
Yeah, do. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
There you go. All right.
Yep.
Just gonna
5-10. Right. If you can all move back, please, so as we can. She is such a wonderful cow that I can lead her anywhere. She's been shown. She's won prizes.
Cows are part of our family. When you load up your best animals to go to slaughter in the prime of life, how long are we expecting to do this?
My overriding feeling is farmers deserve better.
After hours of testing, Malcolm and his son took us to a nearby field where there were signs of badgers. Evidence that he believed showed they were connected to the troubles on his farm.
I think there is no doubt that wildlife plays quite a major part in the spread of TB.
In my view, the cull is an enormous red herring.
We don't want to kill anything, but we're in a situation which I think you fully appreciate, Brian, today. You've seen what happens when you lose a good animal. We're in this position.
Wouldn't you like a solution, Malcolm, rather than something which is just going on doing the same thing? Surely you want a new approach, don't you?
Yes,
Surely you do.
Definitely. I want a new approach.
And you think the new approach is killing badgers, which we've been doing for 30 years?
I don't think that killing badgers is the final answer by any means. But if they will not give us any other option, you put yourself in our position.
Well, I'm saying they should give you another option. I'm saying they should be working out how to protect your herd against any infection.
Thank you very much, Brian. That is what we desperately need.
Well, I'm with you. I don't blame people for being suspicious of me in the beginning, because, I'm a guitarist, I'm a rock star. What am I doing? Why would I have some contribution to make?
Some people will probably say we were foolish, but if we can't meet anybody and talk about our problems, we're not going to get over our problems.
The press are very good at portraying me as someone who doesn't care about cows, and only cares about badgers. I'm the bugger of the badger huggers, and it's destructive, really. In the same way they'll portray farmers to us as unfeeling, None of it's true. When we actually sit down and talk, we realise that basically we do have the same aims in mind. Of course we do. We want healthy farm animals. We want healthy wildlife. We have some differences in opinion as to how that could be achieved, but talking is great, and I thought today was very good.
But of course, what brought us here was the badger. The British badger is our largest remaining land predator. These intelligent, fascinating creatures lead very private lives in their underground world, where they spend most of their time. Living in family groups, some aspects of their lives aren't so different from ours. Youngsters spend time at play whilst the adults do the chores. Badgers are notably fussy about hygiene in their sets, frequently changing their bedding, and very fastidious about their toilet habits. To me, a world without badgers is a terrible prospect. But if the cull continues, they could disappear from our countryside, legally exterminated. So Anne and I decided we would do our own research into the very nature of the Mycobacterium M. bovis that causes tuberculosis in cattle. Could it be stopped without killing any animals?
I've come in to save the badgers. I now realise that to save the badgers, you have to save everybody, because it's a mess. It's a tragic human drama where people's hearts are broken, where animals are killed unnecessarily, and the problem never gets solved. So now I want to solve the whole problem, because you can't solve one piece of a problem without solving the whole thing.
This meant going much deeper in our approach. We needed to work with the farmers, the very same guys who we'd been arguing with for the last 5 years. One farmer in particular was about to become very important in our lives.
Come on! Come on! We're a family farm. Come on! I am third generation. Come on, girls! My granddad was here. My sons are fourth generation. We passionately care about our animals. So you rear a calf all the way through. During its lifestyle, we do the best we can. You're not running off, mate. Not today.
Like so many farmers, Robert's very livelihood depends on coming to grips with this incredibly devious pathogen, M. bovis.
TB breakdown, 2012. Everything was going along quite happily. Never knew we had a problem. I think it was 15 animals on our first breakdown, which was a massive shell shock. We've had breakdowns in the past, but it's just 2s and 3s, and we can clear it up quickly. And we thought we could sort this quickly, and the 15 escalated, and before we know it, we lost 30 or 40 animals. It is a massive shock, absolutely soul-destroying. Your mind is constantly thinking of why have we got it.
And as to why Robert's farm had got it, well, he believed what he was told. It was because of the badgers.
Our first badger set is only 100 metres from the farm. That one's there in that little bit of wood. And then just around the corner here, we got a big amount of woodland area. That's where the majority of our badgers are too. And then there's other sets around in hedges and other places around the farm. So we've got a large amount of badgers right on our doorstep.
But did any of them actually have bovine TB? Well, yes, they did. Fecal tests carried out for us by the University of Warwick in 2016 showed us that about a third of our badgers did in fact have the disease. This was perhaps upsetting, but not surprising, and actually made the farm a perfect test site for our experiment. Could we get rid of the bovine TB in the cattle without harming the badgers, some of which we know are infected?
I don't know what it is. No. I don't know if he's got pressures from elsewhere.
So we gathered our small research team.
Right then, lead on. Yeah.
Alongside Anne and myself, we had Farmer Robert and Robert's large mammal vet, Dick Sibley. Thankfully, a very bright and lateral-thinking man.
That one's clean anyhow, all right? Hot one.
Dick had already been working with Robert, looking for a new solution to the TB problem.
All right, darling. She says, last time I went into that thing, somebody took a blood sample from my tail.
Shoved the needle up my ass.
Yeah.
Dick Sibley is a force of nature.
All right, my darling. We're always nice to them, just like the nurse in the hospital.
He's a very open-minded person, and he's a person who does not like to give up. He will not give up in solving a problem.
All right, sweetie pie. We saw badgers with TB. We saw farms with TB. We put 2 and 2 together. Good girl. I was one of those campaigning for badger controls back in the 90s. I'm now ambivalent about it. I don't really know. But what I do know here in Devon is that we have been killing badgers for the last 5 years or more, and the TB is no better. And indeed, in our area, in mid-Devon, it's got worse. So whether the badgers are involved or not, I don't know, but killing them is not solving the problem. So if you can win him over, mate, you have won a big battle.
Got it.
So together, back in 2016, we began what would turn into a 4-year investigation, trying to really get to the bottom of how this disease is spread amongst the cattle herd. The deal was that we would take care of vaccinating the badgers to eliminate them from the equation, and Dick and Robert would take care of the cows. On the farm, the first task was to look at what was already being done. Other than the badger cull, the government's strategy for getting rid of TB relies heavily on trying to identify infected cattle, using a skin test, very similar to the BCG skin test that many of us remember having as a child.
The work of testing and inoculation goes on day after day. A good vaccinating team can test 20,000 children a month. Already 20 million have been tested, 8 million inoculated.
But when it comes to cattle, there's a very big problem with the test.
The skin test is very good at detecting infected herds. It's not very good at detecting infected individuals.
In fact, the skin test only finds around half of the infected animals in the herd. This is a shocker. It means the undetected infected cows can potentially go on to infect others.
I think that's one of the biggest bombshells of all. The fact that the skin test is so incredibly ineffective and can actually neglect to take out a cow which for years and years can be infecting other cattle in the herd.
So you might ask, we vaccinate humans, so why don't we just vaccinate the cattle? Unfortunately, they would then react to the skin test in the same way as an infected animal, and this introduces problems which have not yet been solved.
That one's clean anyhow, all right?
So instead, for this experiment, Dick decided to use more sensitive testing to detect the presence of the M. bovis organism itself. He implemented 3 different tests that are not normally available to the farmer. Hopefully, by using this combination, all of the infected cows could be found.
Are we all done in here, Robert?
Now you got one here to do, and one I got behind the gate here.
So this is one of the blood samples that will be going to the University of Nottingham, who will be looking for two things. One is for the bug itself in the cells within the blood that tend to harbour the organism itself, and also looking for antibodies, which is the cow's reaction to the presence of the bug.
But just being a carrier of the disease is not necessarily a problem. A third of all humans are carriers of human TB and don't suffer any ill effects or spread it to others. So a cow may have been infected, but we really needed to know if it was infectious.
And the way to do that is to look for the organism in the secretions that she's most likely to be shedding it. So at the front end in the saliva, at the back end in the feces. And we'll see if any of them turn up positive.
This kind of testing is not the most pleasant thing to do.
Come on, sweetheart. Come on, darling.
But it's a pretty basic part of the job for most farm vets.
Here we go, girlie. She'll know exactly what we're going to do. Just use a tiny little hand, go in, pick out a little bit of dung. That's all we need. Put it into a sterile pot, and this will go off for a PCR test looking for the actual organism in the feces.
Historically, TB has always been seen as a respiratory disease, so testing the back of the throat, just like in a COVID test, was really important.
Cows generally don't like their heads being messed with. So we have to be firm but fair. She is a stroppy bitch. Right, we now have our cow. She's biting on the gag. I'm going to go in, come back, saliva. Nice pot. It's the cow equivalent of spitting into the pot. Only another 49 to do.
It was a battle, to say the least. But when the results from the 3 different tests were in...
Job's a good one. We were gobsmacked by the level of positivity that we got. Over 3/4 of those animals were infected with TB. I expected 4 or 5. We got 40.
So we now had clear evidence that the mandatory skin test was definitely not up to the job. With these 3 new tests, Dick and Robert could now find all of the infected cattle.
Yeah, 71.
Yeah, I think he said 71 was down here somewhere.
Good news, right? Well, wrong, according to the government.
Under some obscure act, it is a criminal offence to test a cow for tuberculosis without the written permission of the Secretary of State.
This sounds crazy, but by doing these tests, Dick was basically putting his career on the line. And how long did it take to resolve this bit of obscure legislation and get our study back on track? Over a year. What a waste. It was 2018 before we were back in business. But we came back with a discovery that was to be one of the biggest milestones in our experiment. Not only had Dick's new methods successfully identified more infected cattle, but we had hit the jackpot. We discovered how the disease was actually being spread.
It was coming out in their dung, because that's the only infectious fluid that we found these cows producing, which was a revelation to us. TB has classically been known as a respiratory organism, but we were finding it in the feces. My gut instinct is that the biggest routes of transmission are cow to cow and not badger to cow.
We were a massive step closer to clearing the badger's name. But for Dick and Robert, if they were going to find new ways of tackling the disease, this discovery presented a whole new challenge. Cows produce a lot of crap. And now we know that it's potentially infected crap. We tested our slurry. 1 gram of the slurry on Robert's farm was enough to infect a cow.
Yeah, that's... No, that's
way too much.
That's a gram.
So this amount of slurry can infect a cow.
So here's our problem, Robert. We've got cows here that we know are shedding the organism in their dung. When this is full, how much slurry have we got in here?
About 4,500 tonne.
4,500 tonnes of potentially contaminated and infected slurry.
And we said, well, what happens to its slurry? Well, sometimes we pump it out back onto the fields. Oh, really? And these are the fields where they're growing maize for feed for the cows. Some farmers actually pump it back onto the fields where the cows are grazing. Well, excuse me. Yeah, so what else happens to this slurry? Well, sometimes we're not allowed to put it all over our fields, so we pump it out and it goes to someone else's farm and they put it on there. So you wonder why TB is spreading around the countryside. But it's not just the cows who end up infected. You pump it all out there, it attracts lots of slugs and snails and everything. And of course the slugs and snails will attract the badgers. So surprise, surprise, the badgers get infected. How amazing that nobody has quite twigged this.
So it's most likely that the level of infection that we've got here in the badgers is due to constant reinfection from the cow. I think we've got to try and spread it in a way that doesn't contaminate the environment, and we've got to try and use it only on arable ground that is not being used directly for feeding the cows, and plough it in. Immediately you spread it, get it underground so it turns it safe.
Robert now had the daunting job of trying to keep his 350 cows away from each other's dung. Not easy when they each produce around 45 kilos every day, so he enlisted the help of a friend.
What have you got here, Robert?
This is a slurry collector. Instead of having the tractor and yard scraper, which is running 3 times a day, time, staff, man, doing the job, it's battery operated, and we'll go out 42 times a day, collect the slurry.
Cool bit of kit.
Yep, makes life a lot easier.
Robert also installed fast filling and quick emptying water troughs that cows can't defecate in.
So you've got them nice and high.
Yeah.
So the chances of them getting contaminated are pretty minimal.
No, not very often at all. They'll get dirty, but we just keep them clean. They will empty them every few days.
And he put barriers around feeding areas to keep their back ends away from their food.
Everything we do, we're always thinking about hygiene, clean. We do not want those cows to eat any contaminated slurry at all.
Our solution to stopping the spread of bovine TB on Robert's farm was nothing to do with the badgers outside the farm. It was all about better hygiene inside the farm. And crucially, better testing of the cattle, finding the infected cows and stopping them passing the disease to each other. Sounds obvious, right? But on a working farm, it's not so easy. 2019, after 4 long, hard years, we'd finally done it. We'd implemented the sanitary measures and profiled the herd through testing. And at the end of that time, Robert's farm was officially declared TB-free. The sense of relief and rejoicing was incredible after all those years of suffering and giving up on ever having a livelihood again. Robert Reed's family were able to breathe again, and they had a viable operation. They had a livelihood and they had a life. And it's at this point that I need to make a confession, and it's a big one. We, as the badger side of it, failed. We weren't able to vaccinate the badgers, which was our intent, because the vaccine wasn't available. It was in short supply for humans, so they wouldn't let us have the badger vaccine. But we were able to clean up the farm to rid the cows of TB and get a TB-free status while the whole surrounding badger population was infected. This makes nonsense of the whole premise that badgers are infecting cows, And for me, the whole argument for killing badgers falls to pieces right here. What we also noticed was that none of the cows that grazed out in the fields near the badger sets had ever got TB. The only cows that became reactors were the ones confined to the sheds that never came into contact with wildlife. We made sure of that. Surprising? What does that make you think?
TB has been driven into people and associated with badgers maybe a little bit too much. And they have to say, well, maybe it's not all the badger. Maybe it's not at all the badger, but whatever you think, you have to turn around and find different means of getting rid of TB.
We were TB-free and we hadn't killed or vaccinated any badgers. Despite all the obstacles, we'd done it, and we now believed we had a blueprint that could help any farm.
Big trouble there, Anne, big trouble.
The next step on our journey was to go looking for somewhere to test our strategy and prove our findings on a bigger scale.
In the UK, there's only 2 countries that would have the ability to cull, and that would be Wales and England, because they have high prevalence of TB. But in Scotland, there isn't any TB. As you get further north, it disappears, so there's not an issue there. So we decided to get involved with Wales.
Almost 60,000 people work on farms in Wales, and the industry is suffering just as much as anywhere through bovine TB. So, from sunny Surrey, Anne and I set off.
We're heading to Wales to meet some farmers.
Our first call is in the Gower Peninsula near Swansea to meet a farmer whose life has been devastated by bovine TB.
I remember the day, it was September 2010, where we had a TB test. And there's a lot came back which was positive. They was taken away, they went to slaughter, obviously.
Vivian lost his entire herd to the disease over a decade ago, an ordeal he's never fully recovered from.
I miss my cattle very much, so I do. People won't understand, but it's part of the family, really, because it's your livelihood, and you're with them every day. It was so sad to see them go. I'm just...
To pay the bills, Vivian has been forced to diversify. So much of the farm has been turned into a wedding venue.
Hello, Brian. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
This is the room which used to be the milking parlour, which has now been turned into a wedding venue. And this is where people get married, so...
Which is not really what you wanted.
Not really, no.
So what happened? How did it happen? How did the TB get into the herd in the first place?
The only thing I can think of is, brought in by badgers. I honestly think, why can't we do the same to the badgers as we do to the cows? I mean, test them. If there's a set clear of everything, we'll leave them be. And if there's a set then with a problem, well, they got to do the same to those that we do to the cows and the cattle.
Given what we'd learned, I had a theory as to why healthy herds were becoming infected.
You didn't buy any animals in?
No, only the stock bull.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question then? When the bull came in, he was certified TB-free.
Yes.
Do you know how that was ascertained? Was it through the skin test, or did they do other tests on him?
No, just for the skin test, yeah.
So it would be possible that the TB came in with the bull?
That's something I don't know, because, I mean, I brought him in as tested and cleared.
Because we've seen that in other cases, where people have said, oh, no, it's a closed herd, and then you go, oh, but you brought in the bull? Yeah.
We know that the skin test can very often fail to detect an infected animal. We proved it at Gatcombe. So a clear skin test did not guarantee the bull was safe, and this could be how the deadly disease arrived on the farm.
If the government carry on with this policy, this is what we're going to be seeing everywhere. Farmers will be now losing their whole herds because it's getting worse. And it's a tragedy of monstrous proportions, so we have to succeed in this.
The Gower was the perfect place to roll out our trials. It's a peninsula, so we could limit access and contamination. We had farmers who were willing to work with us, and we even had backing from the Welsh Government. All we had to do was organise a public meeting to spread the word and start visiting the farms to make our case. But then...
More infections of coronavirus are reported around the world as governments struggle to contain further outbreaks.
You must stay at home.
I also had a few problems of my own.
I had a small heart attack. I could have died from that. I was very lucky to be treated as an emergency case, but I think it kind of was an emergency.
As John Lennon said, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. When I recovered, I had to get back to the day job. A Queen World Tour had been postponed and rescheduled, and while all this was going on, something quite amazing happened.
Culling of badgers will not happen in Wales.
Stopping the cull was good news for the badgers, but some Welsh farmers felt their only option had been taken away. So, using the contacts we'd established before the pandemic, we went back to Wales to try again to deliver the solution everyone was looking for. It was too late for us to save Vivian's herd in the Gower, but in West Wales we reached out to another farmer whose livelihood was under threat.
As each test rolls in, you keep thinking, oh, the next test surely will turn a corner, the next test will be better. I've allowed it to get to me.
Chris Mossman took over his dad's farm more than 30 years ago. He grew the dairy herd from just 60 to over 400 cows. Then bovine TB hit.
I mean, one of my friends said to me, there's two types of farms in Wales. There's those that have got TB and those that are going to get it. And unfortunately, he was right. I never would have dreamt that it would have been as catastrophic as it has been. So to date now, we've lost 380 animals to TB since 2016.
He's a passionate farmer who's just had the wind taken out of his sails. It's slowly destroying him. And I think that's what TB has done to him, because it doesn't go away. It's always there. When you wake up in the morning, it's there. And everything he's worked for is just slowly being destroyed. So it's horrible.
Chris has spent years battling TB, and he's still going through this testing ordeal every 60 days.
Come on, girls, push up.
And if any of the cattle test positive as a reactor, by order of the government, they will be destroyed.
2773. It's clear. 3647. It's clear.
We don't want to lose this cow.
This one. She's everyone's favourite cow. Well done, 2208. You're the girl.
It's clear. 3256.
She was 9-8.
Sort of need to remember now that we've done this for 4 years so regularly. You'd be dead if you allowed it to... Like I say, we just got to get through the day and then see where we are. What I really don't want is a reactor. That'll make my heart rate go.
2028. So unfortunately, she's a reactor. A very large bovine reaction. Sorry. Oh. Didn't really need to measure it to tell you.
No.
You can see that one.
So that's a circle with a cross.
We're on a roll there. We had clear, 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 clear.
But this is it.
Bang, bosh.
Yeah, that's the way it goes.
I feel I've let these girls down. My job is to care for these cows. That is my job. That is our job, is to care for these cows as best we can. I've let them down. Somehow, something has gone wrong on this farm. And I'm powerless to do anything about it. You know, we've tried, by God, we've tried almost everything to help ourselves, and nothing to this point has worked. And, you know, I stand there with the cows in front of me, and you only got to look there and think, well, who's next, girls?
It wasn't just Chris who was suffering. His daughter Bella was so terrified about the effect of it all on her father's mental and physical health that she moved back from London to work on the farm alongside him.
I think I'm right in saying that agricultural farmers in particular have the highest rate of suicide. And coming home and seeing it firsthand and being a farmer, I totally get that, because there just seems to be no support for farmers, really.
After 7 long years, Chris is still battling bovine TB. But instead of constantly fighting the disease, for his own mental health, he's just had to accept that every 60 days he may lose more cows. But we know from our findings at Gatcombe we can help him. So we sent Dick along to give the farm a checkup.
Our job here is to clean up your herd from TB. Yep. Point out where this disease might be spreading and try and get your ideas as to how we can minimise those risks.
At the moment, we can't do anything about the government's enforced testing regime, but hopefully Dick can show Chris and Bella that there are options, practical solutions within their means.
We've got to try and keep their feed as clean as we possibly can, not walk on it, not splash it with crap. Cows never step backwards up a step. You try getting one to do it. Right. So your cows will come here and they'll lean over the apron or they'll step up with their front legs. So we could call this the maternity unit.
Yeah.
We've got to think hygiene in this area. It's a hugely important area.
We only clean out this calving pen every 2 weeks.
How many cows could you have calved in this pen in that 2-week period?
It could be over 50.
This is another bombshell, I suppose. It was commonly believed, for what reason I don't know, that the disease couldn't be passed from mother to baby. We now know that that's not true.
So we need to think about this very seriously. How are we going to turn this beautiful maternity area into a much more hygienic environment? I'll give you a radical idea that you might want to think about. Use sand bedding. Put a row of sand cubicles. It's clean and hygienic.
I think your cubicle idea for me is a light bulb moment. I've never thought of it before.
No, yeah, a lot of food for thought, for sure.
It's the beginning of a long road for Chris and Bella, but already they're seeing that there are solutions. Hopefully, it's a step towards them getting on top of this devastating disease rather than having to live with it.
You need to take ownership of the bits that you can control.
Yeah. Dick's offered us it's not a solution, but it could be part of the
bigger picture.
The bigger picture and part of the solution.
Yeah.
Ultimately, farmers need better testing to find all of their infected animals, but until that happens, we want to show them that there are possibilities that give them the power to help themselves. We need to get the word out, so we're going public with our findings. We're going to hold a big public event where we can share our information with the farmers. While I begin to work up a presentation laying out everything we've learned, Anne has drawn an even shorter straw. She's off to meet some of our fiercest critics and get them to come along and listen. Starting with this guy, who's a bit of a social media warrior for farmers.
You've got no idea what goes on in rural Wales. We are just going round and round and round in circles, testing our cows, losing our cows. I'm 100% sure that it's being brought in from the wildlife. Anyway, I'm pissed off. I've never been so angry.
This might not be all that easy.
Rock stars coming into different industries ain't gonna have the answers.
Well, not the best of starts. Gareth's family have farmed on these 27,000 acres of amazing Welsh hill country for over 375 years.
I'm really looking forward to meeting Anne and taking her up onto the Carneddau mountain range and showing where our cows graze during the summer months. And try and explain why I think badgers are the problem for us with TB.
It's invaluable for us to talk to farmers like this. It's really important to meet them at their farms to see the problems that they're facing and to work with them on individual issues to solve this problem. There are solutions, and we need to find them together. Hi, Gareth.
How are you?
Fine, thank you. That was a climb and a half,
What
wasn't
do
it?
you think of my office view?
Worth every second of it. That is just spectacular. What a privilege to be up here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for inviting me here.
Unlike both Vivian and Chris, Gareth's journey with TB is just beginning.
So, how long have you had cattle up here?
So we've had cattle up here for 30 years.
And this is your first lockdown?
This is the first time, yeah, we've had a problem, yeah.
And you think that's come from the badgers?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
they didn't infect them in the last 30 years?
No.
So where do you think they got it from?
So the badgers must have, well, was it a rogue badger that's come from somewhere else?
Or from another place? Have you got TB around here? Is it TB hotspot?
So, no.
So you think it's the badgers, Gareth, so why do you think that?
We've never had a problem here before. We brought one bull in the last 2 years. So we know that bull came in clean. So how did we get TB?
So we've seen herds where bulls have come in. We have cattle that regularly pass the skin test 20, 30 times and don't react to it, yet we know they have TB. And when the bull's eventually gone to slaughter, he's been riddled with TB for like 10, 15 years.
Sadly, it's a story we've heard many times. A supposedly closed herd, except for this supposedly clean bull.
But I would be looking in my herd. That's where I'd be looking, and I'd be looking at better testing, because there is a solution, and the capabilities are there and the science is there. But it needs both our sides to support it and work a way through this.
Oh, look, I totally agree with you. I'm willing to listen. Yeah. I'm willing to be educated.
So we're having a talk to tell you what's happened on the farm that we've been working on with Dick and Robert, and we'd obviously love you to come along, and other farmers. Now, what do you think?
Hey, do you know what? Maybe you'll be surprised that people will be willing to listen. They might not agree with what you've got to say, but what is wrong with bringing a load of people together to start a journey of finding a solution to this awful disease?
And that's what we need to do together. So, can you round me up some farmers, some vets, no pitchforks, and some good thinkers, and we can see if we can start on this journey together.
One, two.
And so, after a summer of meetings and reaching out to farmers, farming groups, vets and local government, we'd been invited to Aberystwyth University, in the heart of the rural community of West Wales, which just happens to be home to the new Bovine TB Centre of Excellence. Here, scientists headed by Professor Glyn Hewinson are conducting world-class research into the disease.
Our philosophy here at the Centre of Excellence is that anybody who has evidence or experience or things that they would like to share with others that will help in this fight is very welcome. What we want to try and do is to bring different stakeholders together, whether they're rock stars, farmers, vets, government officials, anyone who has got a stake in the fight against TB. It's worth listening to so that you can evaluate that evidence for yourself. And I think that theme of empowering vets and farmers to take on-farm decisions to manage the disease is really key. So we were very excited to be able to welcome Brian to give this lecture.
Brian's really nervous. He performs in front of, hundreds of thousands of people. But, and he's stressed.
And Brian is a showman. He's been, and that's his business.
It's kind of on the edge of my comfort zone, I suppose.
I think he's very brave. They don't agree with each other and are spoiling for a fight.
Obviously, Brian has come at it from a different angle to try to get the badger off the hook. And, ultimately, the end result for the farm might very well be the same. But, I'm going to be all ears tonight.
I'm prepared for anything, As with any performance, you expect things to go wrong and you have to be ready for that. So if people start throwing things at me, I will deal with that as it comes. I'm hoping that people will just listen and we can have the fights afterwards. But I didn't come here for a fight. I came here because I think we can offer hope.
If we don't give it a go, we're not going to get anywhere. Okay.
I want to get clear as soon as possible because the constraints of it, the emotion of it is bloody terrible.
This is very important to me, and I haven't taken it lightly. If we're going to play as Queen, I go away and practice, get the fingers worked out. I'm doing it right now. For this, I've been working for weeks, actually, because this is their livelihood. They've been doing this longer than I have. At the same time, I have a lot to tell them. I have a lot of information to bring them. I have a lot of evidence. I can only put it out for them, say, look, this is what we've discovered, this is what we saw. What do you think? So here I go.
Now it's my great pleasure to invite to the podium Sir Brian May.
No pressure then. Good evening. Well, I believe that TB is manageable if we approach it logically within the herd. The solution, as we see it, use enhanced testing. Don't rely on the skin test. Testing cattle feces with PCR showed us that a cow can be shedding TB in its feces even when it has no visible sign of infection and has passed through 30 skin tests. There's so much anger and mudslinging in the history of this whole thing. This is the kind of evening we need, I think, where people actually open up to each other and are honest and look at the other person's point of view. Scrupulous hygiene. Slurry must be a significant medium of transmission of TB from cow to cow. In the PCR test, we were able to confirm that the organism was from cows and not from badgers. No introduction of new stock without enhanced testing. This is absolutely crucial. None of this is your fault. You've been lied to about badgers for a very long time. You were given the wrong information to make your decision. It's so politicized, and people cannot back down. They can't admit they were wrong. Nobody's going to publicly change their mind. I can't stop. I won't stop until I see what I think is justice and common sense prevail. And you probably think I have lots of power. I don't. Nobody's listened to me over the past 10 years. And you probably feel that nobody listens to you either, right? But I think if we get together to move things forward, stop doing the same thing and expecting a different result, I think we can make a change. So I put it to you, together, I think we need a rethink. That's me.
Do you know what? Yeah, fair play. Brian's come here, he's put a great speech, but it's a beginning of a journey. You know, there's a team there that are looking for solutions. We're looking for answers as well.
It's about communication, talking to each other, and trying to work together collaboratively.
People came with open minds, and I think they understand the issues. Now they've got to find a way of implementing the strategies that Brian hinted at, and that's the difficult bit.
This has been a long road, and it's obviously not over yet. Anne and I won't give up, of course, until we get to the truth, and the truth has been hard to find. But we have to get past this business of the badger is to blame. But I would like to go to my grave knowing that the badger's been exonerated, because it was never the badger's fault.